Welcome to Kettlebell Corner, where strength meets theory, where we take you on a deeper dive into all things kettlebell. And today, Roger, I think we're going to tell everybody what perfect form is. All right? This is
Sure,
going to settle
sure.
everybody's debate. Perfect kettlebell form
This is
after
this is
this
it.
podcast. It's official. But first, we got to start with what perfect form or maybe proper form might not be. Or if you want to live in absolutes, Roger, we can get into those too. So, you know, I think when it comes to perfect form, we mentioned this when we were talking about this episode, is that there is no one way to do something. And why does that even matter, Roger? What are we talking about when there's not one way? Because if it doesn't look the way it's supposed to look, it's trash, right?
I don't think most people who think it's supposed to look one way really know what it is they're looking for. And just to be crystal clear, no, we're not going to teach you what perfect form is because it doesn't exist.
Are you calling me a liar?
I am calling him a liar. Um,
Damn.
Perhaps you were being hyperbolic.
Yes,
Perhaps you were
hyperbolic
being
chambers.
controversial. But
Yeah.
there's no such thing, and that's something that we want to get out of the way because this is common with coaches, especially younger coaches. I was there, Jeremiah was there.
Mm-hmm.
We are taught, especially once we get into the industry, the fitness industry, that things are supposed to look a particular way, and you go through a series of beliefs that anybody who does a sit up is an asshole, and your knees can't go over your toes, and your butt needs to go back, and you need to force your knees out when you squat. These are things that are sometimes true, but they're not usually. This idea of form obsession outside of context, and it's very, very important. I'm not saying, I don't think you're saying either, that good form doesn't matter. But what we are saying is it's not the only thing that matters. And what good form is highly variable. And the best and brightest minds in this industry tend to give you the same old it depends answer because the best form is going to be context dependent. I remember when I first started really thinking about this idea of what good form is, I was taught that um, you need a certain amount of hip extension, and running requires hip extension, and if you want to have this clean, ultimate athlete, then you should clean up their form and make their form better, and then they were just going to perform better. And then I'm watching one day. I don't watch sports, at least not intentionally. It was on. I happen to see. I
Were you at
don't.
my house?
Maybe, but I saw actually a track meet on TV, and I was watching like every one of the athletes. What I was taught at the time was dysfunctional. There's yeah, anterior pelvic tilt, and look, there's too much valgus, and all of these things. And it's like, wait a second. If I need to give people optimal form, and that's just going to clean them up, and I'm relatively new to training, then am I smarter than their coaches? Because these are world class people. And I was like, I don't think I am. I think there's something I'm missing here. And I started to understand that these things, that different tasks have different forms, that things function on a continuum, and that there is a different form that is going to be required for someone who's in pain versus someone who wants maximal performance. They're going to be different things. So this notion that there is one form, it's dumb. It is. If you think that this needs to look a certain way, I get plenty of feedback, telling me that, my form is wrong. Okay, cool. Thanks for nothing. Like I'm always open to a debate. I'm always open to hearing another point of view. But these 100% of these conversations are stupid and pointless. It's this needs to look this way or you're doing it wrong. Tell me
Well, yeah,
why.
and everybody's different. You know what I mean? Like, believe it or not, Roger and I aren't twins of each other. I think we measured my legs one time for some weird reason. You wanted to know how long my legs were, and it wasn't for a new pair of pants. And they were super long. And we were like, oh, well, maybe you got to position your squat different. I think it was squatting. I think we were doing some back squats or something.
Well, no,
My form might
actually,
look different. What
I
was
was
it?
going to cut off your leg skin and wear it like pants.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
But
Anyway,
is that why you keep sending me lotion? Um,
obviously.
but and to the running point, as somebody who spent a significant amount of time running in a previous life, and every time I tried to change how I ran to fit a perfect form mold, I mess myself up
Sure.
every single time. Every time. I think we have some sort of natural movements that we kind of fall into, and I want to talk a little bit more on that in a bit. But let's after we've you've kind of sounded off on the form police, you know, calling you up, telling you your form is bad. What are some form absolutes, maybe myths that we need to avoid, and why?
I think some of the ones that are really prevalent in kettlebells, upper body lifts. We get the rack and the press. The whole idea of a vertical form. We've talked about this before. People are probably sick of hearing it, but the idea of
This is only a short episode. How could they be sick?
when you well, maybe they watched some of our other episodes anyway. But when you have a bell on the back of your arm and your forearm is vertical, you're twisting up to the outside. So this myth of vertical when it comes to the rack, when it comes to the press, I think that's problematic. I think the I'm okay with if people want to classify the basic shape of the backswing as a hinge. I'm cool with that. I don't think it is a hinge, but I think it's hinge like. That's
There's a
fine.
hinge aspect. I mean, your
Sure.
hips hinge, but your knees bend. And,
Um,
anyways, that's
but
another episode.
I don't think people really understand when they hear it's a hinge what that is. And to be more specific, you get people who think that, torso parallel to the ground and the butt goes way back and there's no knee bend. Yet when you ask the same people, and I've done this is usually an effective way to end the conversation. You say, okay, you look at is a deadlift a hinge? Like, oh yeah, that's like the ultimate hinge. Okay, cool. So if when people deadlift, what do you call the type of hinge you're trying to do? I mean, if you're saying a deadlift is a hinge, like there's a lot of knee bend. There's a lot of, yeah, the hips go back, but the knees also bend, and different lifters have different form. But for whatever reason, we can see that there's a lot of knee bend in a straight bar deadlift, but we don't accept it at all when it comes to a kettlebell swing. So the idea that you need to have this flat back and vertical shins, that's a problematic. Different people are going to have different degrees of verticality. I think another one is the idea that you must keep the arm tight to the body when you're moving the bell, especially when you get into rack squats. One of the
Okay.
common things I'll see, this happened to me a few times. I've worked with students who've worked with other coaches before I got my hands on them, and like,
It
oh,
wasn't me, was it?
no, it wasn't you.
Okay.
It's this idea that I've got to keep my arms tight to my body, yet they didn't have a body that was able to get very vertical in the squat. So what ended up happening is they uh, had a choice to either keep the bells connected to their body and then do a really powerful arch to get more upright because that's what was demanded of them, or they needed to come forward and they were basically doing a bicep curl to keep the load connected to the body, and that was a problem too. So for a lot of people, you let the arm cheat forward a little bit, their squats are fine. You get the stimulus to the legs. In time, do they get more vertical? Usually, you get some mobility improvements, but I find it's a lot easier to get that done rather than hammer them, for an hour with correctives and stuff like that because they sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And usually though, people get pretty frustrated when they show up and they roll around for an hour before, you give them, or 55 minutes and you give them 5 minutes exercise and send them on their way. People aren't usually very happy with that.
Yeah, and I think there was probably like 10 years ago, it was like the main thing in fitness, or at least it was at the place where we worked at, where everybody needed some sort of corrective, and 15 to 20 minutes of your session had to be that, and maybe that's not the case. With that in mind, there's the idea of mobility before is it mobility before stability, or is it stability before mobility, or is it
Well,
just put the weights in your hand and let's see how you move, and what happens from there?
as far as I know, this is something that I heard from Gray Cook uh, when I was looking into his stuff years ago, and I think what he was saying is before you load up a pattern, especially excessively, it's probably a good idea to have a joint moving well. And I don't think that's bad advice. I don't think that's bad advice at all. But I think the industry took it and ran with it, which meant that you can't load anybody up. And this was, this was partially, I think, his fault by, using the FMS, which just I think it can be useful for some people. It's a tool. I don't happen to think it's a very good tool personally, because I don't think there's a huge correlation between successful movement. When I'm not going to get too far down that rabbit hole, but the idea is people didn't want to load patterns until they saw perfect mobility, whatever that happens to be. And I can think of hundreds, literally hundreds of times where I've given someone more load or given them any load, and suddenly the pattern has improved. Suddenly, my table tests, when I was doing those, if I was doing those improved, pain went away, load went up. What I saw was really, really solid because I actually gave somebody load and forced them to create stability that triggered exactly what the brain needed. So I don't think it's necessarily bad advice, and I do think that if you think that someone's overhead motion is here, and you just give them dumbbells and say go to town. I don't think that's not what we're advocating, but there is sometimes a middle ground where stability doesn't in fact help mobility. And we can go into why that is, but I don't think we need to. But the point is that there is a segment of our population, our fitness population, coaches, practitioners alike, that thinks that we can't do anything until we move perfectly. And there are the rules that you can't flex your spine and your knees can't go over your toes. And then we're made of glass and we've got these overuse injuries. And that just isn't true. People shouldn't be afraid to move. So while you should strive for a form that works for you, it is not universal. It's not dogmatic or absolute. It is something that is going to be context dependent. And there are a few things that you should consider what good form is, or what good form to be, rather than just sticking to this one sort of cookie cutter way of doing things.
Yeah, and to your point, and I do want to talk about what good form is, enough of bashing it, but to your point with adding the weight sometimes, particularly with kettlebells in this two-arm swing, a lot of times, and we've both seen this happen, and it probably has happened to you if you're listening, you might go the next weight up and your swing might get better because you have to react differently. You have to commit to things a little bit more. Maybe you're now using your legs and because you aren't physically possible to front raise it with your arms if that was the mistake you're making. And then subsequently in the goblet squat is another good spot where that usually happens. Maybe you can't get that vertical squat. Well, it turns out if you counterweigh it with the kettlebell, then you might actually get down a little further than you were before, and to a more advanced position, the pistol squat too, which I tried the other day and fell flat on my ass. I'll send you the video, Roger. It's quite glorious. I was like, I'm gonna try everything I know right now, and I know I thought I could do that, but I couldn't. So still working on it.
To your point, before we sat down to film this, I just was teaching someone how to swing, and I went one bell up, and guess what? Form improved.
Hey, it's like magic.
And to be fair, this wasn't necessarily a mobility issue, but I will say that the person's movements were small and wouldn't open up. I couldn't get her to go deep enough into the backswing for her body and for her needs. And as soon as she had the bigger bell in her hand, I think it becomes more relevant. The brain seems to do more with it. And once I told her to pull the bell down, from the backswing, or from the float rather, she got into the perfect backswing for her, and the look on her face was like, oh, that was so much easier. Yet, the contradiction, or appearing what appears to be a contradiction, is the heavier weight made things a lot easier. So, the point with all of this is that we don't want people to be afraid to move. There can be some trial and error. Maybe it's not going to be perfect right away. There are obviously the stop signs that you want to notice. And again, no one is advocating bad form or that form. Actually, some people advocate that form doesn't matter. You people are also stupid, just to be clear.
Yeah, you know who you are, you sons of bitches.
But but there's there's a middle ground. We don't need to be on one side or the other. Forget all the camps and all this stupid stuff. There are contexts that where maybe you want to do something that's a little unorthodox, or maybe you want to let someone have bad form. I was actually working with a longtime client and and his son wants to learn kettlebells. And we're in the backyard, and it's adorable. He's got these little 15-pound kettlebells, sand filled. And I'm watching my client, and he's just on the verge of having an aneurysm because he sees his son with this form, and he's looking at me like I should tackle him or chastise him or something. And he wants to give him, 10 different commands. And all I did was like, and then I pulled him aside and I explained, like, look, let him learn. Let his brain figure it out before you start barking all these commands at him. Let's see what happens when he does this again. And sure enough, he picked up the bell, and I didn't say anything. He got better. And then the third set, he didn't get any better. He stayed just where he was for the second set. But guess what? I gave him one cue and he got better. So, the sometimes it's okay to have some shenanigans happen and just kind of sit back and wait and watch.
Yeah, as long as they're not going to blow their spine out their back. And like kids, I think as adults, and somebody who has a kid who allows him to swing kettlebells in a weird, wild way. And I don't know how old that kid was, Roger. How old was he that your
I don't
client's
know
son?
kids, 18, 6, I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right, well, whatever. I have an 11-year-old who I'll let do some kettlebell swings. In fact, like that's our summer challenge is, we do like 10 swings a day, and that's not a lot,
Sure.
but that might be a lot for a kid. But you watch them and you do wiggly things and they're trying to coordinate it. And then, they, out of the 10, they might get 4 good ones. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Did you feel those? Yeah, that was cool. Wasn't it? That was fun. Kids, that's a whole different animal when you train kids. But let's not talk about our kids anymore. Let's talk about form and porn. You know it when you see it. So good form, we're going to know it when we see it. Bad form, you sort of don't. But let's start with this first thing, Roger. I don't know if that was a good segue or not, but
You're not, like, when you look at the transcript, you're not supposed to put porn and kids that close to one another. I'm
yeah, I
just
might edit this out. Just kidding, I won't. I'll say that, but I won't. But
the court
number one thing,
mandates.
yeah, they're like, we're gonna get flagged. All right, for all you out there, number one, I think we put this down, and this is in no particular order, but this is just one of the things, and
So,
is
what is good form?
yeah, what is good form? And one of the things we talked about was, does it get the job done? Okay, so
So,
let's talk about like in the context of maybe, I think we were talking about overhead press with this one. Is that where you want to sort of jump off at, or
we can. I don't care what the movement is, and this is the interesting thing: is it gets the job done. It's binary. It's yes or it's no. The idea that, let's say you are using a press, right, and the press goes up. Did you get the job done? Yes. Does that mean you had good form? No. However, however, if the press didn't go up, you had bad form.
that's for sure? Because if you
And
had good form, it would have went up.
exactly, it didn't get the job done. Okay, maybe like, oh well, maybe you need to get stronger. Yes, maybe you need to get stronger. Assuming you're strong enough, yet you did the thing and it didn't work, then you had bad form. And I've coached a lot of coaches to get heavier presses, and this is very commonly the thing. I'll tell you the thing that gets in the way most of the time is people think they need to keep their shoulder blade pulled down when they press. I get that a lot, especially from coaches. And
Really?
they're keeping their shoulder blade pulled down, pulled down, pulled down, like, oh, I gotta get my lat on. Like, you dumb dumb. Do this. And then all of a sudden they're strong enough to do it. I make an adjustment. I get their shoulder blade to move, and suddenly the press goes up. So just because a press goes up doesn't necessarily mean that the form was good. But when it doesn't go up and you're strong enough, that means the form was bad.
Yeah, and I believe you like to reference some weird diagram that we made of me with bad form, not getting a press up, and you with, I'll just say, good form, getting the press up.
Sure, better form.
Okay.
It
Yeah,
it
I'm
worked,
gonna
and
say
there
it was bad.
we can break it down. There were parameters. There were reasons why my press went up and yours didn't. and you were strong enough to do it, which I know because once I yelled at you a little bit, you did it.
Yeah, at least there wasn't whips this time. And um, the the other thing that we could talk about, especially when it's like, does it get the job done? The next thing I would say is, do you feel it where you're supposed to feel it? Right? Like, for example, let's just go back to that press and that silly diagram. I'm leaning heavily whatever direction to the left. I'm trying to press with my right, and I'm getting a mad cramp in my mid back. And I suspect that's not where I'm supposed to be feeling my kettlebell press. Um, you know, however, if I'm going with the swing and now I'm feeling it in my back, I'll be perfectly honest. I did a little too much the other day, and I happened to be filming what I was doing, and I was doing some jerks, and my mid back was a little uncomfortable. And as I watched it back, oh, I felt it, and I felt it because I didn't, line things up, and it definitely didn't feel how I was supposed to feel it, and that made some pain. So, where 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 are you supposed to feel each exercise or each skill? Who knows?
Well, I mean, I don't want to do the who knows cop out thing. If you want to use
I was
your own,
baiting you, Roger. I was
okay.
baiting you.
If if you want to do do a bad kettlebell press in order to train your low back, go ahead and do it. And if that's your objective and you accomplish it, cool, great form, buddy. Um, but the dominant joint that's moving is and the muscles surrounding it. That's where you should feel the stuff. If you're doing a squat, you should feel it in your legs. And guess what? If you feel it in your back, you have shitty form. Fix it. Not because it needs to conform to a particular standard, because you're probably going to hurt yourself if you don't. And why are you doing a bunch of squats for your legs if you're only feeling it in your back? It's pretty simple stuff. You should feel it where you're supposed to feel it. And I understand that that is not always an option for people. I work with several older people who don't have full mobility, range of motion, and they need blood flow. They need to get stronger. And over time, yes, they eventually feel it, but it can be pretty challenging, and they're often impatient. They don't want to do what I tell them to do. It's like, okay, go to town. Um,
Use your back. I'm just kidding.
no, but it's there are a lot of there are people who will play the I'm doing a chest press and I feel it in my bicep. Like, okay, I know why that could be. Are you going to listen to me? Or are you going to do the work? No. But anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. For the most part, though, if you're watching this and you want to get good at kettlebells, feel the things where you're supposed to feel the things. That is a sign of good form.
Yeah, and then what about compensation? What if something else is taking over and is affecting your form? Is that going to, that I guess could be a dictator of good form? Would you agree or?
Well, we go that whole spectrum that I mentioned earlier. So, I was taught that the when your glutes are not doing glute things or they're not working well enough, that your low back is going to take over. And people would call that a form of compensation. So if I've got a relatively new exerciser with back pain and I notice that they have no hip extension, that their legs are not contributing to the movement, then yes, I would not want the back to facilitate the work of the leg. That would be a problem. Going back to that world-class sprinter example, when I'm watching people really run, I'm seeing that deep back arch, and their back, that compensation actually seems to be contributing to the movement. And if it didn't, then why would they do it? So, there's a bit of a continuum here. But yes, that is something to look at. This idea of one thing performing the job of another. So I think it's important to point out that there's an idea in biomechanics called force summation, summation of forces. I've heard it called a few different things, and that's where you want multiple things joining together to create one movement. So in the example of the track athlete, you're going to see somebody who has really strong quads and glutes, and they're creating that force, that ground reaction force, and then eventually the low back might contribute a little bit, but it's not only doing the job of the glute. The glute's still doing what it needs to do in order to power hip extension with the hamstring and the quad close chain on the ground. Like, these things are all working together to create this motion. So the back is coming in as an addition rather than as a substitution, and that's something we want to focus on. So if your job, or if your objective is to train a particular body part or movement pattern, and other stuff is doing the job, that form of compensation is going to be counter to the notion of good form.
But and then I think kettlebells lends itself to this um, sort of well in the sense that when it comes to like a press, you're going to involve some of those muscles of your legs, and they're going to help out. You're going to get tight in those quads and those glutes a bit, and your core, and all these sort of things. And then, like in the swing, yeah, you may think like, oh, my butt's going to be doing a lot of this work. Well, your quads are going to be doing some of the work too, just as they would with the sprinter.
Sure.
And so kettlebell kind of lends itself to other parts helping out, not necessarily compensating.
Sure.
And that's usually going to be a
Absolutely.
good form, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
you also want to look at something like, is this a maximal lift or not? I've seen some really, really solid Olympic lifters and power lifters with, I mean, just what most people would call perfect form, or at least perfect form for them. And then you see them get into really heavy attempts that they complete, but maybe they're a little off. Maybe the background's a little bit too much in a pull or more than normal. Maybe a knee dips in a little bit more. Whatever the case may be, it's not a lift that necessarily fits to their standard, but it's what they needed to do to get the job done. So in that case, am I gonna, go call out a world record like, no, it didn't count, he compensated?
yeah.
Like, that's dumb.
Hey, he had a little bit too much knee wiggle.
Sure.
Cancel that.
Like this dude just pulled 1,000 pounds off the ground. I'm not gonna say anything to him other than congratulations.
And that's a mighty big kettlebell. Um, now let's so just to be clear, we're talking for good form. Does it get the job done? And these are in no particular order. I think it's kind of a combination of everything, really. And it's, does it get the job done? Are you feeling it where you're supposed to feel it? Is it causing you pain? Hopefully not. You want to not have pain. Is the dominant joint action accomplishing most of the movement? And are you supporting or compensating with other muscles or parts of your body? Is sort of, kind of the idea of what I don't want to say perfect because we all know nothing's perfect, but good form, solid form that gets you there, right?
Sure. And I want to call out the one with I want to call it the one with pain. In most cases, if you are just a casual practitioner, you want to avoid this. Training into pain under the surgical supervision of a real expert is sometimes necessary. There are people who understand, like, hey, you have a joint limitation for this reason or that, and the only reason, or the only way we're going to be able to get past this is for you to experience some pain. Whether that pain is a product of a physical limitation or it's a neurological response that was grooved in for whatever reason. So there are some times when, people understand what they're doing, they understand the risks, they're monitoring for the pain to get back to baseline, at least within a particular time period, usually 24 hours. So there are some cases where that is acceptable and even necessary under the right guidance. But for the casual practitioner, pain is a very solid indicator that you're doing something stupid.
Hmm.
And it's probably not going to just go away. It may go somewhere else, so then your wrist issue becomes an elbow issue, becomes a shoulder issue, becomes a neck issue. Like, that's possible. But, the idea that I'll push through, usually it's a simple fix. It's a, hey, put your feet here or change your angle there. Usually pain is very instructive. And if you can use that as a simple test, like, hey, it hurt to do this squat before. Okay, keep your bell over your foot. Did that hurt? No. Cool. You go through, you do a set. Second set, hey, it hurts again. Look at the video. Is your bell over your foot? Oh no. That pain became an indicator. It became a reminder. Hey, dummy, keep your bell over your foot. If
Hmm.
that's your fix, then your pain becomes a good watchdog. Like, hey, make sure you've got your form on point.
And what was that book? No Pain, All Gain. Is that is that the name of that book? What's
Are you
your
talking
guy?
about Bill Hartman's book?
Yeah, yeah. Wasn't that the name of his book?
Yeah, I believe
Yeah,
so. It was a good book.
clever. It
I
is a
like Bill
good book.
Hartman.
Yeah, solid. I want to just wrap this up today and talk a little bit about how we evolved as coaches and what the ideal form turns out to be in our life. And this got me thinking, Roger, about when we used to stare at your basement wall gutting out I don't know how many reps of snatches to pass this snatch test, and we're like, yeah, this is good. And I remember watching it when we finally stopped hurting our wrists, and we're like, yeah, this is good form, this is good form. And then as the years have gone on and we're learning, oh, if we keep things the bell over the foot, or we work more efficiently, things get better and it's smoother, and oh, this form is good. And I've even been at certifications or perform lifts in front of people, and they're like, that's good form. But at one point, I thought a big archy, non-banging of my wrist snatch was good form. So your form kind of evolves. Your idea of good form, in my mind, kind of evolves as you practice and get better and start to learn some of those efficiencies or shortcuts or nuances to. I don't think shortcuts, but nuances to each lift, and I think that's kind of what form's meant to be. It's not great at first, it gets better and it continues to get better, and sometimes it changes, and sometimes you regress and have to revisit the ideas and principles that got you to the better form.
Sure. And what you're describing is an interaction. Good form's not an event, it's a habit. And it's
Mm,
one that you cultivate over time. A lot of our initial struggles with form was because we were trying to achieve a standard that someone else set out that was inaccurate or not described well, or someone meant this, but we took it this way. So one of the reasons why we do what we do, why we're on here rambling, is to give people some background and encourage you to think about what good form is, to actually interact with your lifting, because a lot of the time people will just ignore the stop signs. They will ignore the fact that their form is garbage because they think they're trying to do it a particular way. When we thought that a snatch was a swing that ended overhead, then we were just trying to do what we were told. But the outcome was bad. Yet we were ignoring it because we were doing the right thing. And fast forward a lot of physics textbooks later, a lot of basement sessions, a lot of thousands and thousands and thousands of reps later, we learned the why behind all of these different decisions, and then we started actually tweaking things, and like, yeah, actually I think this is better for me. I actually have different forms for different things. If you're watching me, let's say, do a snatch session, there's a lot of variation in my form. If I'm doing, let's say, a snatch test, then I'm going to have a lot more shift back of the hips. I'm going to be slower, and I'm going to use my body mass to create momentum as opposed to the chemical energy from a really, really hard leg drive. The variation is probably only 2%, but it's pretty substantial. Um, so both are good form, but one is more appropriate for the task at hand.
yeah, that's good context right there. And essentially, there is no final form. Just keep getting better with your form. Is that what
Yeah,
you'd say?
I,
All right.
I I would. I would. I mean, we've been doing this for years, and we're still finding nuances. We're still finding, subtle ways to get better, ways to teach better, um, and ways to feel, the different lifts in a more meaningful way. So absolutely.
Yeah. All to this day, always. I mean, we do kettlebells a lot. We do other things too, but we're always tweaking. We're always trying to find the best way for us at that time. And I think in fact, I know that if you kind of keep these things in mind, you will also have good form, whatever that is for your needs at that moment.
No, it's
Is
very
that vague
uplifting.
enough?
Ugh, gross.
Blah. Okay. Be sure to follow us and share this podcast with anybody you know. And what do you want to know about? What do you want us to, as Roger put it, rambled on, even though we did prep and we have points that we went over? What do you want to know about? We want to share it with you. We want to give you our insight. So please put it in the comments, whether you're watching on YouTube, you're listening on Spotify, or you just find us on Instagram. Hit us up. We want to be there for you. And anything else, Roger?
Yeah, actually, that gives
Okay.
me an idea. If you're out there and you're listening to this, if you're watching this, if you want help, if you want us to take a look at your form and talk about it, we're happy to take a look. We're happy to evaluate some things and give people some feedback. We're not gonna give you intense coaching. We get paid for that, but we can point you in the right direction. We can give you some other things that we've done. But we're happy to take a look and point you in the right direction because we want people to get this down.
Yeah, I did it this weekend for some random guy studying for an SFG. I said, hey, just do this and this and watch these 6 videos. And their mind was blown, Roger. And if I can blow their mind, imagine what Roger can do. All right, that's enough. That's
Enough.
enough. That's enough. All right, thanks for listening. Download the Bells app and stay strong, everybody.